Every couple has a dance. If you switched partners, you would have a different dance.
If we're at the therapy level, we're in trouble. Like the marriage is in trouble, the relationship is in trouble.
What it is understanding. Sometimes we misunderstand our partners.
There's something about midlife that makes you look at yourself differently.
I think resentment can be improved and resolved.
You mentioned that you're seeing a lot more people deciding to cohabitate.
Sometimes there's very practical reasons to stay together, and not everybody stays together for love.
I'm Dr. Beatrice Seguin, PhD, and you've landed on my podcast this time of the month, your trusty sidekick to the midlife roller coaster. I chat with experts digging into legit solutions for midlife hurdles, be it health or lifestyle. Ready for the ride? Dive into this time of the month. Subscribe and catch the latest episodes on our channel. Let's own this midlife magic together. On this podcast, we've covered so much about the physical health aspects of perimenopause. But you know what? Knowing there's more couples that are divorcing through midlife more than ever, I'm excited because we have Amanda Bacchus here. She is the founder and the director of the Vaughan Relationship Center in Vaughan, Ontario, Canada. She's a registered social worker, psychotherapist, marriage and family therapist. She specializes in helping individuals and couples improve their relationships with practical solutions. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
So happy that you're here, and there's so much to cover. Like, relationship's a pretty broad word.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
What does your practice focus on, and do you see this in your practice? Let's call it not just divorce, like the splitting up, the tensions.
Yeah, we tend to see this, and it can happen at different stages. When a couple's just had a baby, we can see that. We do see it a lot in midlife when the kids have moved out of the house or they don't need their parents as much, and then we can see that couples are looking at their relationship and they're going, I don't know you, I haven't met you in a while. And the things that were underneath the surface that were always there, but maybe the focus of children took it away, now that's starting to come to the surface. So we'll see a lot of couples in their 40s and 50s coming in and saying, we're not getting along, we think we need to work on our communication. And in my practice, we tend to focus more on heterosexual relationships. Not that we don't see same-sex couples, we do, but just in the community that we work in, we tend to see more heterosexual couples.
And like I said, relationship is such a broad term. We can't cover all the topics in one episode. So yeah, let's talk about, first, how do you even realize? I think sometimes it's subconscious, right? We feel something's not right in the relationship, but to put that into words to yourself first, and then to say it out loud to your partner. Now, what does that journey look like? How do we come to those conclusions, then be less, more open to talking about it? Because I think a lot of people don't say it.
Yeah, because a lot of times people are worried that they're going to upset their partner, they're going to create chaos in the relationship, so they kind of hold it and hold it and hold it, and they'll hold it for too long. And so a lot of times couples are going through issues for about 7 years before they'll come and see us. So
is that where the 7-year itch saying comes from?
Maybe, maybe. Yeah. And they'll be trying it over and over again. Maybe they're trying their own way to say to their partner, "Look, I need to make a change. We need to do something different here." But it's not landing with their partner, so they'll just go around in this dance. And what I see with couples is that every couple has a dance. Every couple, it doesn't matter if with your existing partner, if you switched partners, you would have a different dance. And so every couple has a dance. And what we want to see in relationships is that around a 5-to-1 ratio. So for every one negative interaction, we have 5 positive ones. But when you see that you're having more negative interactions, then that can create upset in the relationship. And a lot of times couples just hold that for so long before then it comes out, and it comes out in this big explosion of like, okay, that's it, I've had enough, I'm out, I don't want to do this anymore. And the other person goes, where's this coming from?
So, okay, examples of 4 positives, 1 negative.
5 positives to 1 negative.
5 positives to 1 negative. Give me an example of that. Do you mean like we're just having nice dinners, nice walks, we're talking, and then there's a fight? Or can it be more subtle than that?
Yeah, so for the 5 positives, it could be simple things like appreciation. That's a big deal. And when I talk to my couples, I say, like, thank each other for making dinner. It's like, thank you so much for making dinner. I mean, you didn't need to make it, so thank you. Or thank you for taking out the garbage, right? And we think it's so silly, but just that acknowledgement and recognizing that other person and not taking them for granted can make a positive impact in the relationship. But then there's also too, like, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, and having these different things happening, like not sitting on opposite ends of the couch, for example, just hanging out like you did when you were in your 20s and you'd leaning on each other and watching TV, like something so simple like that, or going to bed together is also something I see with a lot of couples later on in life where they don't go to bed together, right? And so these little things can make a big difference. But I think couples struggle with the fighting. They think they're not supposed to have an argument. Mm-hmm. If we're having an argument, this is bad for the relationship. And that's not realistic. You're 2 different people. You're going to have an argument every once in a while.
You know, that's interesting you say that. We have teenagers, and my husband and I have 2 teens. And sometimes if there's a tiff, you know, it can be something as silly as the dishwasher or whatever it may be. And the kids get worried. They're like, oh, when they were younger, they're more aware now, I think, but to be like, are you, you know, is something wrong? Mm-hmm. And I think so that means in their mind, it's already, that messaging has somehow been incorporated in their mind that an argument means breaking up.
Yes.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. Or our relationship is doomed.
There's something doomed. Mm-hmm. So how do we establish safety in arguing and show that to ourselves and our children?
Well, when your kids are young, I would say under 5, and you're having arguments, they're not going to know this is a bad argument or a good argument. They can't decipher that. So we try not to have arguments in front of our children. I mean, later on, as long as you're not having arguments that are volatile and we're throwing things or swearing at each other, name calling, then, you know, arguments are okay, right? Yeah. In terms of understanding arguments, so typically what we see, about 75% of couples will see a certain dance, as I said earlier, right? I don't really like this terminology, but this is the terminology we use in my therapy world. So we'll see like somebody who's more the pursuer and somebody who's the withdrawer. So the pursuer is more of a person who goes, I see a problem, we need to talk about it. It's gonna be a bigger problem. This is important, I need to talk about it now. And the other person, typically the male partner, but I've seen it in reverse, the male partner will go, oh my goodness, we're gonna have a fight, this is bad. I can't do this. They feel overwhelmed, they might feel helpless in that moment, they don't know how to fix it, because men, in my opinion, have been conditioned to fix problems, right? Mm-hmm. And they go, I need to fix this, and it becomes too much, and they can feel overwhelmed in that moment. And when we get overwhelmed in a conflict, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, and the logical part of our brain leaves, right? The emotional part of our brain is taken over. And so what can happen is they can either get angry and then leave, or they'll just quietly leave and not say anything, right? And the pursuing partner's left going, do you even care about this? Do you even care about me, right? And this is a typical interaction with a lot of couples.
So how do we break that cycle? How do we help both parties, one not feel like abandoned and do you care, and the other one not feeling, would it be threatened? Is the person who, because you know, our fear response is like, oh, somebody's yelling at me, somebody's angry with me, this is danger, I need to find safety, right? So what I talk to couples about is, like, for the person who is more like, we need to talk about it now, I talk to them about, like, you can bring up an issue, but then give your partner some space, because they need to process. They are not on board. You've probably been thinking about it for days or weeks or hours, right? Years. We'll talk about resentment in a minute.
Sometimes years, right? And something triggers it and brings it to the surface, and your partner is a little bit blindsided in that moment. So if you're going to be the one to exit the conversation, you have to say, look, right now, I can't have this conversation with you. It's like, it's important. I understand it's important, but right now I can't do that. So I'll come back and find you in about an hour. Because it takes about, 20 to 60 minutes, if you're really fired up, about 60 minutes to get your body back to its baseline. Because like I said, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, right? And then if you're the person to exit the conversation, you need to go back and find your partner. Now, when your partner returns, if you're the pursuing partner, you need to be receiving them well, because if you're angry and you're criticizing, then they're not going to want to come back. So you've got to create a safe environment, and for you to get what you want, right, is to have this conversation. And then for the withdrawing partner, I say, can you look past the tone and look at the messaging? Because a lot of times we just look at the tone, and there's so much more behind it. And when you do this over and over again, arguments we see tend to happen less frequently, and that creates that sense of safety. Like, oh, we can resolve these things, and it doesn't need to be chaos.
Is there any value in texting each other? We're in the era of phone and crazy schedules, not going to bed at the same time, not waking up at the same time, sometimes just because of work schedules, right? So what's your advice on texting the beef versus saying it out loud to each other? Yeah.
It depends. Every couple's different. I think if you're a person that you need some time to process and then you want to think about how you want to say it, then that's okay sometimes. But if that's your only way of resolving arguments, then you need that face-to-face, right? You're not making that human connection with your partner, and then it's still that the issue around not talking continues, right? So sometimes it's okay. Sometimes I think it's okay, but I like texting in terms of that emotional connection of like, hey, how's your day going? I'm thinking about you. I can't talk today, but I'm thinking of you.
That's nice. That's nice. A nice little touch to add to the day. Yeah, I think appreciation is severely underrated in a relationship for the little things. What are some other good examples of showing our appreciation towards each other to create that intimacy between two people?
Like we said, is like the texting is very nice. If you have different bedtimes, then go to bed with your partner, and then when they fall asleep, you can go and do something else. One of the things that my couples do and a lot of people have said this to me, is that they'll take some time and they will, before everybody wakes up in the house, they'll get up earlier and they'll have coffee together. So that shows that if you're making that time, you're showing that appreciation and connection to your partner, saying, you're important to me. And really just saying thank you. It's like the silliest things, right? It's like, oh, thank you for dealing with that issue with the principal at the school. I wouldn't have done it that well, right? And it might not seem like such a big deal, but it is a big deal to just acknowledge your partner and what they're doing.
I mean, I'm obviously focused on midlife and from the woman's, health perspective on this time of the month. And I feel like the burden, the mental burden, really does still lie a lot on the woman as caregiver, right? The work, the taking care of doctor's appointments and things like that. How do we get the partners in our lives to realize that what they need to do is anticipate and see and observe that she is drowning, and a thank you is a great start. It does go a long way, but what's the second step? How do we get our partner to go to that next level?
So with that, what sometimes happens is women are act like martyrs, and they go, I'm just going to do everything. Or they are highly critical of their partner, and they go, if I leave you to clean the kitchen, you're not going to do it look, these spots, right? You didn't clean it, right? So what we have to kind of take a step back and give our partners space, but we also need to articulate it. So our partners are not mind readers. While we would like for them to anticipate sometimes it's just really off their radar. And when you are taking over all the time and doing these things, you've created a routine and a pattern. And you're asking them to come into this pattern and routine. So you need to tell your partners, look, today I'm having a rough day. I can't do everything. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Please, can you do these things? I'd really appreciate it. Over time, they'll start to anticipate. But in the beginning, they may not catch it. And what can happen is then partners will feel, women will feel resentful. They're like, do you even care? Do you not notice? How do you think that the dinner got made and dishes got washed? How did this house get clean and groceries showed up in the house? How did you think all this happened, right? And that's how it's conveyed to their
Yes.
partner, right? And saying, you know what, this is what I need. I think you have an issue when your partner won't show up and do those things for you. That's when there's an issue.
Right. Okay. So that's really interesting. So on the anticipation front, what I'm getting from you, and that's a really good point, is we articulate a whole story in our mind, and we wish they would anticipate, but we're not saying it in a calm way, like in a.
You know what? I'm a believer that sometimes it isn't going to come out in the best
Okay.
way when you're tired and
Yeah.
stressed, and that's where your partner can have a filter every once in a while and go, right? Or you articulate, like, if you go, why are you yelling? It's like, I'm tired.
Yeah,
right?
I've
Just
said
saying
this
that.
10 times in 10 different ways.
Yeah. Usually for me, if I'm saying it the third time, my tone is a little different,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you're going, is anybody listening to me right now? But you need to articulate it to your partner and say, this is what I need. Can you please be very clear? Be very
Yeah.
clear.
The Margaret thing resonates, I think, amongst women. You know, when we're together chatting with each other, we are very good at telling each other what's our burden, what's annoying us, and perhaps taking on things that we're choosing to take it on because we want it done a certain way or we want it done now. So
we could do it better and
we
faster.
could do it better. So would you say we just got to relax a little bit and accept that things aren't going to be by your standard for everything?
Yeah, and just because it's not at your standard doesn't mean it's not done well. It's still done well, or it's done, right? Like if the kitchen is clean or groceries were bought, but they forgot a couple of things or they bought the wrong cookies, groceries are in the house. It's okay. It's all right.
So caring a little less about the specifics and looking at the big picture maybe of, okay, is someone helping me? That's the goal here, the team goal.
And when we're criticizing our partner and said, oh, you did the groceries, but you brought the wrong cookies, right? They're not going to feel motivated to do it again. It's like, I can do nothing right. So we have to look in that sense of appreciation. It's like, what are they doing well? What is going well, right? It's like, well, I asked for a tea. Well, you at least turned on the kettle, okay, right? And you had to run out the house and you put the kettle. Okay, all right, I can accept that.
On the issue of when they're not showing up, right? So we've done this. We've articulated. We're not getting any change in behavior. When do you know that this is an issue that needs either intervention with a therapist? You know, because some people see going to therapy as failure, right? If we're at the therapy level, we're in trouble. Like the marriage is in trouble, the relationship is in trouble. So how do we help bust that myth? I suppose, is therapy good even when things are going pretty well?
Yeah, sometimes therapy is great when you're, like it's, we have some minor stuff that we need to resolve. That might be a good time to go in. So before it's like a really big problem and you needed therapy yesterday, that might be a good time to go in. But more often than not, people tend to go when it's like, we're at rock bottom right now. Like if we don't get help, somebody's leaving the relationship. I look at therapy as like when you take your car to the mechanic, nobody goes and says, well, why can't you fix your car? You had to drive it. You know, put gas in it. Why can't you fix your car? It's the same thing with relationships, right? When you're in it, you can't navigate that on your own. So you need a professional who's on the outside, who can be an outside observer and see that, right? So not having this mindset of like, I should be able to fix this, right? Why should you? You shouldn't. I do this for a living, and I can tell you there's times I get into it with my own partner, and then I hear myself, and I can't stop myself, and I go, what did you just tell your clients earlier today, right? Because what happens is that human response shows up, that survival instinct shows up, and it takes over. So it's not failure. Actually, it's strength. If you go and see a therapist and talk to them and say, look, we can't navigate this. Like, we're in it. I don't know what's going on. I'm articulating it. I'm expressing myself. It's not landing. And usually, it's like a lot of my couples will say, we can't communicate. And I said, that's a fallacy. That's not true. We all can communicate. You and I are sitting here having a conversation. We can communicate just fine. What it is understanding. Sometimes we misunderstand our partners. And so...
And why is that? Why do you
sometimes
think
it's like the tone, it's like past history. You always do these things. I've seen it in the past, right? Those kind of things. So we have to move past those filters and move past the tone and start to go, okay, right? So for a woman going, he always walks away from, I'm talking to him, I'm trying to fix this, he always walks away from me. And what they may not be realizing is that their partner is quite overwhelmed in that, right? They just cannot, and they're worried. When I hear over and over again that I don't want this to be the last argument, so I'll keep my mouth shut. And in some ways, they're trying to preserve the relationship, but it doesn't look like that.
Right.
It looks like you're walking away and you don't care, and that's going to fire up anybody.
So, what are the things in your toolkit to help improve then how the communication happens or the understanding of what each person is trying to bring to the table?
So like I said, you take that break.
Yeah.
And then coming back and having a conversation. And some of this you might need to do with a therapist to help you understand your cycle, because when you're in it, you're not going to understand. You're not going to understand that my partner right now feels like they're not good enough. Oh, my wife feels abandoned right now. You don't know that. And so understanding that pattern and that cycle, and then when you're in it and you see a reaction from your partner, you can go, oh, that's what's going on. All right, I see this differently now. Now I can approach them. They don't seem so unsafe anymore.
There's a lot going on in people's, I think, minds at all stages of life, but in midlife, you've got this storm of taking care of dependence on both sides. Your career, usually on average, people are at kind of peak time in their careers, but all of a sudden this stuff's happening to your body when we talk about perimenopause on the show, and so you're seeing yourself change.
Yeah.
And you might be making decisions in your mind about you not liking the change, and therefore your partner doesn't like the change. Do you see that in your practice? How would you coach women who might, and the partner too, because I bet you both partners are creating the story in their minds, right? Of what might be happening.
Yeah. One of the things that I notice too with women is that when they're coming in midlife, they sometimes say they have more anxiety and depression happening. There's the body image stuff that's happening. There's the hormonal changes that are happening. I tell my clients, I go get your hormones checked. Let's see what's going on there. Go speak to your physician. Let's make sure everything's okay there. But I think that when we neglect it to hormones, or we just say it's based on hormones, we're dismissing a lot of things that might be happening, right? And so there could have been this feeling of like, I need a change brewing for so long. That now it's coming to the surface. It's like all the worlds are colliding at the same time, and the husband's going, I have no idea what's going on here. Or just calm down, just stop it. Or it's in your head.
And that just makes it
right?
worse. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and so for their partner to understand, like I look at the emotional piece, right? I'm not looking at the physical piece. Well, I think that's a component. I'm not looking at that, right? I'm looking at the interaction between the couple.
But I appreciate that you tell your patient to kind of, we need to look, it's not a one or the other.
Yeah.
It's a whole picture of the woman in it, right?
Yeah. And not dismissing, okay, well, they're just, it's a perimenopausal day. That's what's happening here, right? It's going really understanding, like, why do you think your wife is really anxious right now, or she's going through this depression? What do you think is really happening here? And helping them understand, it's really just understanding. People hold so much inside themselves and don't share it. And sometimes they don't even know it themselves. They discover that through therapy.
I think there's something about midlife that makes you look at yourself differently. It's almost like a taking stock. I don't like to call it a midlife crisis because it feeds into that narrative of hysteria, whether for a woman or a man, right? The crisis mode. It's more of a taking stock in midlife. And it's not just the hormones. I think it's, a lot of women, we talk about change, but it's who was I at 20? What were my dreams? And what has transpired, now, at 20 years later? There's a lot happening
Yeah.
there. How do you help tease those emotions out to get on a path to feeling less crisis mode and more reaching a new phase of life?
Right.
Yeah, how do you work through that?
I think sometimes people get stuck in like, you're supposed to be static all the way through your life. And I go, no, you're growing, you're changing, your ideas, your values change over time as you get older and you're exposed to more things. And so you're not the same person you were in your 20s, and I should hope not, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like closing the chapter on that. Sometimes there's a grieving process of like, okay, I'm not that person anymore, and that's okay. Or like going, okay, that's who I was then, but this is who I am now. And then having that conversation with each other, with your partner, and going, okay, this is who I am now. This is what I want for my life now, right? And it can take some time to discover that, of what you want, because you had your career, it's like, okay, I had to go to school, I had to get the job, then I had to have kids, and now here we are, it's just the two of us again, and I don't know myself. I've been just so busy with my life that now I don't know who I am. So taking some time, slowing down. I love journaling. I think journaling is such a great exercise. This is not a couple of months process. This might take a year or more to figure this out. Try new things and figure out what it is that you like now, or what do you want for your life right now.
And they don't have to be big things necessarily. I think there's a lot of pressure also, like, what is this next stage, and does it have to be a big thing? You know, what is my next thing? Yeah. Do you think that resentment is something that can be managed? You know, resentment for many reasons, right? Just build up of resentment in relationships. How do we cope with that?
I think resentment shows up because we call it as like a wound or an injury. Something happened that fractured the relationship, where somebody felt alone or abandoned by their partner. So it could have been something like, I was at the hospital and you didn't show up in time, or you left me alone with a sick child in the hospital. Or I can't tell you how many times I've heard the wedding day story and the mother-in-law or somebody in the family making a comment, right? And then that argument comes up over and over again, and it starts off with the dishwasher and it ends up about their mother, right? So what gets it going and continues it is when the partner who didn't know what to do with that situation, usually the husband who didn't know what to do for their partner in that situation, and goes and says, you know what, that happened a long time ago. Just get over it. You know what? Like, why are we still talking about this, right? When is this going to stop? That keeps that resentment going. So to stop that, what we need to do is acknowledge and go, okay, I just didn't know how to navigate that situation. Or I know you were in the hospital, or I know you were there, but I had to deal with the other kids, and then I had all this stuff, and I got stuck in traffic, but the whole time I was stressed and worried, right? And saying those things, and the other partner going, okay, I can accept this. Because there is some acceptance that needs to happen of like, your partner was doing their best. It may have been the best that you would have wanted, but they did their best, and accepting that. So I think resentment can be improved and resolved. I think when you can't move past an injury, like an affair, or somebody betrayed you in some way, or that you really felt alone and abandoned, or it's happened over and over again, and you can't move past that, or it can't be resolved, then you might decide, well, maybe this relationship isn't for me anymore.
Yeah, the resentment piece is really interesting. Thank you for, bringing up, obviously, between two people. I think what I see in my generation, and it might happen at every generation, but certainly what I'm observing is there's also resentment towards not your partner, but more the circumstances, right? The things that our generation was expected to do that we've internalized and just kind of robots marched forward. And then you take stock in midlife and you're like, did I do that because that can be the schooling, the career, the choices you've made. But you're all of a sudden realize, well, where am I in all of this? And some resentment can come out of that.
Yeah, because, and also too, it's cultural. Some cultures where you're supposed, right? So a lot of women are told, you're supposed to well, North America, you get a job, you get a career, but your career isn't the most important. Family is most important, right? There's something wrong if you put your career first.
Yeah, sacrifice for the
Right.
good of the partner's career. You want to be there for your children. You have this guilt going on where you,
And then you're supposed to have children, and you're supposed to have children. If you don't have children, then you're a selfish individual, right? You should have children. And so you get pressured into these societal norms or cultural norms that you're supposed to do, and you can get lost in that. And then when your kids are old enough and they don't need you as much anymore, you're going, where's my life, right? Where's my life? And you can be angry about that. And that's fair. That's fair. And because you're looking, you're going, there's a whole chunk of my life that I've lost. I tell my clients is like, well, you're not dead, right? You still got time.
Yes.
And like honoring the choices that we had to make. Sometimes we just have to honor it. It's like you made these choices because you felt pressure, you felt you had no choice, you'd be ostracized from your family. Like there's lots of reasons why you made these choices, and just acknowledging that for yourself and having compassion towards yourself that you needed to make those choices. But now you can make different choices. And you're gonna if you don't have to leave your relationship. You can have a conversation with your partner and go, look, we need to make a change. I need to make a change. I want to give you a heads up, right? I'm going to go through this exploration process now, right?
It can be hard for your family to see you want to change or see you struggling through that change. How do we communicate, that I'm still me, but I hate the fact that we have to sort of use language that's, I'm going to be a bit more selfish now, because it's not about being selfish, but how does a person navigate the change with the context they're living in?
Right. Well, we're not going to abandon our family,
Yeah.
right?
We're not going to run off in the car and never come back, although sometimes we feel like that for 5 minutes or an hour.
Right? Sometimes we'll do that. It's like, I need some space, I'm leaving, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. Just tell everybody you're leaving, tell everybody you're okay, but you need some space. But letting your kids know, especially your children, like you want to let your children know, and we tend to focus more on if we have daughters, but I think your sons should know too, right? So they can not pass this on in their own relationship and be supportive to their partner later on. And so you're just modeling for your children what they can do for themselves. You're trying to break this cycle for them. And so as you're coming out of it, it might be uncomfortable for everybody. It's like, what's going on with mom, right? And they might label it as something as like, oh, she's having a midlife crisis, right? No, it's just that I'm now discovering myself. Now I have space now to do this.
It's important to tell people that you deserve the space to rediscover what your needs are. Giving ourselves permissions. It is not easy.
No, because if you've been conditioned that you're selfish, because women are not supposed to take care of themselves. They're supposed to give to everybody else. And if you've been conditioned for that, it's going to be really hard to take those steps. And it doesn't mean that if you're taking care of you, that you're selfish, or you're doing stuff for yourself, that you're abandoning your family. No, you're just doing for you, and that's okay.
Now, you did mention the A word earlier. Resentment for things like affairs.
Yes.
Should we go there? Should we have the discussion?
Yeah, that's what I work with a lot.
I'm sure that's part of a practice. Yeah, so tell us, how do you work through that scenario with couples?
So stereotypically, what I see is that the male partners have the affair, but it does happen in reverse, where the female partner had the affair, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But when an affair has been discovered, it's going to be utter chaos. Everybody's upset, there's heightened emotion, there's a lot of anxiety. For the woman, she's going, I don't even know you anymore. You've now shattered my entire world. I can't trust you. Sometimes they can't even trust themselves because they go, this happened under my nose and I didn't see it. How could I not see this? And now they're angry with their partner because it's like, you put me in this spot. So it is upset, there's anger, there's no talking sometimes. That's the first phase of that. What can happen then in the second phase is that it gets a little bit calmer. And there's like, it looks calm, I should say. It looks calm, and then there's all of a sudden this spike that happens, and then it's calm again, and then there's another spike, and the other partner's blindsided by this. What they don't realize is that the wife has been thinking about this all the time. It's in their mind, ruminating. They just can't be at the state of anxiety all the time. So that's why you have this flare up. And I prepare my clients and say that this can go on for months. This can go on for months. If it's going on past a year, then we're gonna have a discussion of whether they can accept that this affair had happened. One of the things that I do suggest is that, you're gonna have lots of questions, right? Who was it? How'd you meet them? How long has this been going on, right? But a lot of times people will ask about the sex, right? Like, was the sex better? Was it about this person? Were they prettier? Those kind of things. I encourage my clients to not ask the details about the sex, because what will happen is you're gonna put images in your head, and it's gonna create almost a PTSD situation, right? So while as a therapist, I say this, I appreciate as a woman how hard it is to not ask, right? I can appreciate that. I could put myself in someone's shoes and going, I would probably want to ask too. But it really, you have to fight it.
Wow, the connection to PTSD, I wouldn't even think of that in terms of how traumatic putting images in your mind may be.
Because it is a trauma. It's a trauma to you and your relationship, the whole thing. So if you're going to work on your relationship, or even if you're ambivalent, you're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, go see a therapist right away and work through it and see if you can. Well, I work with lots of couples where one person is ambivalent and the other person wants to work on it, and we just do that for a bit of time until everybody is on board that we are moving forward, or they've chosen to end their relationship. It's not my decision to make. I don't tell my clients if they should stay together or not. It's up to them. The other thing too, what I find is that sometimes the affair goes to extended family, to friends, couple friends, all that. Try to keep it contained, because everybody's gonna have judgment about this, right? And around the morality of it. How could you have done this, right? I really look at it as, you had an agreement with your partner. If you're in a monogamous relationship, you had an agreement with your partner, you broke that agreement. And so now how do you build trust back in the relationship? And that also takes time. And sometimes people's nervous system can't tolerate how long that's gonna take. I look at with my couples, I talk to them about what was going on before the affair. What did your relationship look like? And because typically we can put some pieces together as to what may have contributed. But we're not gonna pinpoint the exact reason. And I have yet to hear a partner go and say, thank you for that reason. I feel better. Yeah, I can accept that as a very good reason for having an affair. You're just never going to get that. That's never going to happen. What's going to maybe happen is you can accept that something really awful happened in your relationship. Something really crummy happened, and that part of your relationship is now over, and you now need to renew your relationship in a different way.
So again, a grieving process for what was, and a decision. A decision on, do we move on, rebuild trust, or do we move on separately? Do I want to take the risk in trusting you again? It's not like, okay, now I trust you and we're going to move on. No, am I willing to take the risk to trusting you again? Because it's always a risk. It always has been. Every day it's a risk that we trust our partners and hope that they're not going to betray us in some way. Oh, I wanted to talk about women in affairs. Okay. So I do see that women have affairs, and I think it's a little different than when a man has an affair. Usually what I see is that the partner they've been telling their partner for years that something wasn't good in the relationship, and it hasn't been heard or received. And sometimes they, not consciously, but they're looking for somebody else to connect with, and they can feel good. Like all of a sudden they're talking to a coworker about problems at home, and now this grows into a more intimate relationship in terms of emotional intimacy, right? So the problem isn't really, not the problem, the thing is not about the sex and the affair, it's about searching for intimacy, but elsewhere versus
Yes.
in your relationship.
Yeah, because you're not getting it.
You're not getting it.
Right? And you're not consciously doing this, right? You're not purposely doing this. I think women get judged more, though, than men when they have an affair. It's like, how could you do this to your family? And I see it sometimes is that for some women, it's the only way they can get out of their relationship. Sometimes they're in abusive relationships, controlling relationships, or their family is going to say, why did you leave your partner? Like, you need to endure. Why can't you just manage it, right? And this is the only way. Maybe their family would go, you know what, I can see why he left you, because you went and had an affair. This is their only way out. So I think women have affairs for different reasons, and they get judged way more harshly, in my opinion.
There's definitely a double standard.
Yeah. And I talk to female partners about having a lot of compassion for themselves around that. Like, if there was a reason for that, like, why did you exit this relationship? Because they can then be really hard on themselves due to that moral judgment.
So it's not enough to be dealing with your own journey. You're dealing with society's judgment of your action.
Yes.
That's a heavy burden to carry. Typically, how long would you work with a person to work through these issues? Like, these are not days and weeks long.
No. Sometimes it can be a year or more when we're working through this and having therapy on a regular basis to go through it. Especially with affairs, we can't fast forward that. We just can't. There's some time that's involved. So, I mean, I do intensives with couples as well, but when an affair has been disclosed, an intensive may not be helpful because there is the grieving process, the anxiety needs to be lowered, and some of that is just time, unfortunately.
What about when it's not disclosed? Do you have people come to you in your practice to just sort of talk things through in confidence with you?
Yeah. And that can be tricky, right? Because what I think morally and how I can support my my clients is very different, right? I do put judgment away because I don't live anybody else's life, so I can't have any judgment towards them. But we try to explore, like, what is happening? Like, why did they look at this other person? What's drawing them to this other person? Especially for women, if we're looking at women in affairs, why are they drawn to this person? Are they having some guilt? But figuring out why are you having this affair? And do you want to leave your relationship? Is that what's happening here? And you just don't have the courage? What's the consequences if you do leave? Right now, too, in our society and our economy, it's really hard to leave because it's like, where am I going to live? I can't afford it.
You mentioned that when we first met. You mentioned that you're seeing a lot more people deciding to cohabitate, but live separate lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
That's a hard one to do,
Yeah.
right? You have
How does
to
that work?
Yeah, I think if you have emotions, a lot of emotions, and upset with the other person, resentment, it's going to be almost impossible to do that, right? Unless you've divided your house and you have like a basement apartment and somebody can live upstairs, somebody can live downstairs, it's going to be very, very challenging. But there are some couples that can go, you know what, I still need you physically. I need you to help me still. The kids still need your help, or I need things done around here, or I'm not well and I still need your support. I need you to take me to appointments. Sometimes we'll just do it that way, but it's like, you do you and I'll do me, and yeah.
So in that case, would you help the couple navigate or negotiate? Like, what would you call that? It's almost like an agreement, you know, what are the terms of the new relationship?
Yeah. It's almost like creating a cohabitation agreement, right? And I will admit, this is kind of new. This is new to my practice. I'm just seeing it more and more right now.
Do you think COVID kind of, the pandemic and having everyone stuck together in a household, like, do you think there's a correlation there? Or
I think the pandemic brought out issues that were always sitting there at the surface, underneath the surface, and now it's up. And that when they were all together and we had nowhere to escape, that brought it more out. But I think it's the economy right? Our economy, we're struggling. Everybody's struggling.
Forcing people to stay, at least in an economic agreement.
Yes, yeah. And I've seen all kinds of marriages. Like, we live in North America, and we believe that marriage, you need to, or in a common law relationship, you need to love each other. And not everybody stays together for love, right? Sometimes there's very practical reasons to stay together, and that's okay. I talk to my couples about, like, that's okay. That's all right. it's not for anyone else to judge.
I really like that you're bringing that up. I mean, we are so conditioned to look at the Hollywood ideal, the movie ideal, I should say, right? Of what being in love looks like, and what the ideal marriage looks like, and then we're just judging ourselves against this really fabricated ideal. So, do you have any perspectives on sort of around the world, like just from your own observations? Yeah, what constitutes a good relationship? Let's ask that question.
Yeah, so like we talked about earlier, it's that 5-to-1 ratio, right? 5 positive interactions for 1. I think it's, how you guys define your relationship. It really is. And if one person decides this isn't working, then it's not working, right? And it's how do you want to define it in your household? And while within your culture, there might be certain things that you'll still do, there might be things that you want to do outside of your culture and step outside of that. And then if you have very strong cultural values, then talking to your partner, like, is that okay that we step outside of that, right? So it's just really, it's always conversation. It's keeping each other in the loop.
Amanda, how do we normalize, I talked about this movie ideal of what a relationship and intimacy and passion, what we think it should look like. But how do we normalize that it's going to change? It's not going to be the same as when you first got together, versus 20 years in, 7 years in, 30 years in.
Yeah. Because you can't be in that state forever. Things got to get done. Right? So, you will come out of that state. There'll be times where things are boring. And so if you want something, and the thing we talked about earlier about women being martyrs is like, if you want something, ask for it. It's like, don't say, you know what, honey, there's that Italian restaurant just opened up down the street. I was like, oh yeah? No, say, could you please book a reservation? I'd really like to go out with you. Saying what you need. And being okay with that, because like what we see in the movies, that's a snippet. That's a 2-hour snippet of someone's life, well, pretend life, right? And it's not reality. It's just not reality. The day-to-day, do we see movies where you're yelling at your kids and you're disheveled and trying to get out the door, and you show up to work and you realize that your shirt's inside out? Like we don't see that in the movies, right? And also, too, what you're bringing up too is that sex changes.
Yes.
Right? Sex changes in a relationship. And first of all, like your body has changed. We mentioned that earlier. Your body has changed. And sometimes, like, you might, especially in the perimenopausal stage, like you start to put on more weight and you might be self-conscious and things like that.
Do you know how many women tell me one-on-one how they don't even want to be nude in front of their partner?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
That makes me so sad, because once again, we're telling ourselves, right? And whatever the thing is, we all have our own definition of like who we were before and what made us feel good versus what we see is happening to our bodies now. How do we get out of that thinking? Do the partners care?
Partners don't care. I'll ask them. It's like, do you care that she had hairy legs? No, I don't care. Right? Does she need to do it? No, I don't care. Right? Like, especially if they haven't had sex in a really long time. It's like, I really do not care. Like, I don't care. We can have the lights on. It's okay. We can have sex in the middle of the day. It's okay. Right? There's a lot of people will, especially women, go, no, the lights need to be off, and I don't want you to see me. And right? And sometimes too for women is like, we're not allowed to be sexual beings. There's something wrong with that. And so they suppress that. And so I talk to women about, like, that's okay. And where does this belief system come from, right?
Well, let's go there. This is really interesting to me.
Yeah, because
the suppressed desire.
Yeah. Because
this starts young.
Yes. You're a slut if you want it. And then certain cultures and religions will make moral judgments around sex, and that comes out. And so then we suppress it. And I've seen it even with like 20-year-old women who are going, I don't feel comfortable having sex with my partner, and we just got married, right? And we have to work past that and going, it's okay. One of the things that I talk to my couples about, though, and I get a lot of pushback on this, is scheduling sex.
All right.
I get a lot of pushback because they go,
takes the romance out or something?
It needs to be spontaneous. And if you think about it, most of the time sex is very much scheduled. If you think about when you're in your 20s and you're dating your partner, you would groom yourself, you get yourself ready for a date, and you're getting yourself ready, and in the back of your mind, you might be hoping to have sex, right?
Yeah.
You've already planned.
That's part of the build-up.
Yeah. And your brain is the biggest sexual organ. So you've already planned sex. You're just waiting for the green light from the other person. That's what's happening here.
Yes.
So I talk to couples about scheduling sex. And a lot of couples too in midlife have gone years without having sex.
Do you have a percentage on that?
I don't, actually.
We're going to have to look that up. We'll put that in our episode notes if we find the percentage, but I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah, it's years. Sometimes it can be anywhere from, I've heard, from 7 to 20 years of not having sex, right? So if you've not been doing that, then I'm not going to encourage you to go and have intercourse right away. This is not good. And when you start, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward. But the couples who schedule sex do have more frequent sex than couples that don't. So, because we're just waiting for it to happen. We're waiting for somebody to make the first move. An exercise that I give my couples is, we call them sex dates.
Sex dates.
So, if it's her date, she's gonna tell her partner in advance. They're gonna set the date and time. And then she's gonna say, this is what I want. I want us to have a bubble bath, or I want a massage, go get these oils. This is the kind of sexual acts I want you to perform. And so he's fully aware beforehand, right, what needs to happen. And we're not gonna have intercourse or penetration. And looking up what's called sensate focus exercises, which is like, touch, and exploring each other's bodies and figuring out what feels good, because sex probably became routine as well. Even for people who are having frequent sex, it can feel routine and mundane, right? It's not the movies. Sex is not the movies, right? There is some, like, you need to take a shower beforehand, right? Like, sometimes it's like, or you know what? You're a smoker. Can you brush your teeth before we have sex, right?
I love the practical, real things you're saying to us right now. I love it.
Yeah, because that's the real world.
It's the real world.
Right? It doesn't just happen.
No.
It doesn't just happen. And then they switch, and then it would be his turn a couple days or a week later, and then she will do whatever he's asking. The only caveat I put to that, though, is we're not asking our partners to do anything that they're uncomfortable with.
Right.
We're not forcing our partners to do something. If they have an aversion to something, that. We're not, well, it's my sex date, you need to do it, right? We still need to create safety.
Amanda, how do we help navigate forks in the road? Different relationships, you might come to a point where you have to make a decision. How do you know? How do you navigate that?
There's lots of reasons why you might get to this place. Maybe you haven't been communicating it to your partner. Maybe just like you've just fundamentally changed, you just have different values. And so if you get to this place where you're going, we can't negotiate this anymore, I can't align with you on that. For example, now I want to have an open relationship, and that's just against the rules for the other person. It's like not for their values, and it's like, this is something I really, really want, and I don't want to be in a monogamous relationship anymore. That's a fundamental issue, right? And you might then just decide that maybe this isn't for you anymore, like you've just grown, right? So Esther Perel, who's a really good therapist, she said we're gonna have like 2 or 3 relationships in our life, right? And sometimes that changes due to life circumstances, but sometimes we gotta renew our relationship, right? And
within the relationship, right? That's what I think I've seen that. You're gonna have 2 or 3 within your relationship.
She says that she's married her partner 4 times.
Right.
But she's been married to the same partner.
Yes.
Right? And I really like that.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, because you're not the same people. So it's like, okay, I want to have this, I want to do this. Or you know what, I know we wanted to buy a cottage, but I really would just rather travel the world. This is what I want to do. And the other person's like, I hate planes. There's no way you're getting me to do that. I hate other hotel rooms. Like, this is not going to happen. So like, see if you can negotiate it. And if it can't be, and you're like, I'm going to give up too much to stay in this relationship, then it might be beneficial to part ways. And you don't have to part ways angrily. People can divorce. I know it's like unheard of, but people can divorce as friends.
Amicably, yeah. This reminds me of the episode with Janine Morrison. We had a wonderful guest, and she talked about how, her and her partner are together, but he lives here in Canada, and she spends part of her time in Portugal. So I think these types of situations are really important to share, just to show there's different, it doesn't, there's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amanda, I think what I hear you saying is really, at the end of the day, a successful relationship is the one that works for you and your partner, and there really is no other barometer of measure.
Yes. And blocking out judgment from others. If you ask other people's opinion, they're going to chime in, and it's going to put you off kilter. And just doing what feels right for you. If the two of you are comfortable with it, nobody else really gets to have a say.
I'm thinking of the Esther Perel example that you shared. And I think it's really relevant in midlife for couples who've had children and who've focused so much on raising that family and throwing the careers in there. Is there a way to prepare for that second or third relationship and preempt what we refer to as the empty nest syndrome? Which I don't love that term, but I can see why we call it that. You know, my teens are growing. I see that, I feel the nostalgia already. So what can we do to prepare for that phase of life where you're left alone at home?
Yeah, and it happens
staring at each other.
It happens quickly.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden you blink and they're gone.
Yes.
Right? I think when you're starting to notice that you're spending more and more time with your partner, it might be a good idea to start to check in, talk about what you want to do in your future. I think, though, especially for women, because the responsibility of raising a family is put on women, and then they feel bad that they have this empty nest feeling, and there's guilt with that. And I think just own it. It's okay. It's okay. That chapter's over, right? And it's not that your kids are leaving you. They're going to come back. They're going to need you when the grandkids show up, right? They're going to need you again. But just right now, they maybe don't need you as much. And going, okay, what do I want for this stage of my life, right? Is it I need to reevaluate my interests and what is it that I'd like to do? Where do I want to spend my time? What is it my husband and I want to do? Just having those conversations.
Because I think there can be deep feelings of loneliness in that. And is it okay is it too late to, I don't want to say reinvent, you're not reinventing, but is it okay to start something new?
Yeah, or called a reorg.
A reorg.
In your relationship,
Yeah.
right? We've got to reorganize now, right? Just like what companies do, they don't stay static. They do a reorg every once in a while. You got to do a reorg in your relationship and go, okay, how do we do this now? And this chapter, what does this chapter look like, right?
In your mind, what would be the ideal time? Like if we were to put a time, this shouldn't be like when, a year before the whole flock of birds is leaving.
Yeah, maybe when your kids are in high school.
Yeah.
We'll start, right? Because that will go quickly. And start having those conversations, spending more time with each other too, because they're out with their friends, they're doing their thing. You can spend more time with each other, send them out, let them hang out with their friends, schedule your sex date.
Yes. Amanda, let's take the sort of opposite scenario. Sometimes in couples, there's one might be one partner who's more working outside of the home and one partner who's working inside the home.
Yeah.
And they've basically managed and built a whole life around accepting that as the normal.
Yeah.
And then the partner retires or slows down and they're in your face all the time. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, because now they're disrupting your routine,
Yes.
right? This is what we call a reorg, right? So there's things that you're going to protect, right? Like you have your Thursday lunch with your friends, whatever, right? There's things that you're going to protect or your downtime that you need. And so letting your partner know, that's protected. You can't be in my space when that happens. The other thing, too, is like the house is now in disarray. They're leaving clothes, things, the dishes in the sink. So having these discussions, it's like starting again. It really is like starting again from the beginning, like when you first got married and going, this is what this relationship needs to look like going forward, right? And then talking to your partner, going, are you okay if I go off and do my own thing? I don't want to feel guilty for leaving you, and right, and maybe helping them figure out what they need to be doing in their spare time and their free time so they're not in your hair all the time.
I like to joke with my husband and say every year on an anniversary, we renegotiate the terms of the contract.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
You have to re-examine.
Yes, that's a good idea. Nice anniversary dinner
A little
conversation.
anniversary contract renegotiation. Yeah, we do it with athletes. Why not do it with our spouse?
Right? Exactly.
If I were to ask you the 3 things you really want people to take away from you today, what would those be?
Good question. One of the things I would say is that people don't have an issue with communication. We all can communicate just fine. So it's understanding, figuring that piece out, the underlying messages, the body language, all that stuff. It's just understanding each other. So that would be the one thing. I'm assuming this is a summary from based on what I said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, schedule sex. You'll have more sex. And enjoy that time. While it's going to be awkward in the beginning, it will, and might feel very routine and structured. Then what will happen is it'll become more natural over time. And not thinking that you need to figure this all out by yourself, and you're not a failure. It's actually a lot of courage to go speak to a professional and help you navigate it, because as you're in it, it's going to be really hard for you to do it with all those emotions being stirred up. And so you need someone on the outside that can see things. I can't tell you how many times I've sat with a couple and somebody's reacting and I go, what's happening for you right now? Well, they just said this. I go, no, that's not what they said. That's what and I'll check with them. It's like, this is what I heard you say, right? And they go, yeah. It's like, well, how did you hear that? Right? Mm-hmm. That's normal. That's normal because we hear it through our filters and our experiences. So you need sometimes an objective outside person.
Those are 3 fantastic takeaways. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
I need to ask, what makes you feel beautiful?
I know, my husband compliments me all the time. So that makes me feel, he's like, you look pretty today. He'll say that pretty much every day.
That's a lovely answer.
Thank
you for being here today.
Thank you.
When I was in my 20s, I started collecting antique teacups. The first one was gifted to me by my grandmother. So it means a lot to me, not just the teacup, but the ritual of sharing a teacup with a loved one. And I've passed that on. My daughter and I, and my son, we do high tea together at home. And what better way to share a moment and a conversation than with a lovely tea bag, heart-shaped. How can you not fall in love with this? But more importantly, the content, the loose leaves, the quality of the tea that the lovely tea company produces is so wonderful, and it's right here in Ontario. Check out thelovelyteacompany.com. You can also find them on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thanks for listening today. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The content shared here should not be considered professional medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for personalized medical guidance. We're here to empower and support you, but your health decisions should be made with your own medical team. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.